Okay, so jumping back into it in part two here, projects, programs, and portfolios, right? Every big business has them, right? So a project is a single entity. This is what is the focus of this course. A program are a group of related projects under a single leader, a program manager. And of course, a portfolio is much broader than that. It'll have programs and projects as well as potentially operations under it. I'll show you a picture here later in these lectures. So the best firms are going to have top management involved in all of these, right? The sponsor would be involved in projects. A senior leader above a sponsor. Sponsor is somebody in management, right? A senior leader and a sponsor owns the budget, right? A a program manager is going to then manage several projects at once, and you want that senior leadership involvement is a really good sign that it's healthy, right? It's the way to get feedback. It's a way to continually engage key stakeholders, right? Lots of people are stakeholders. A stakeholder, by definition, is any individual person or group that can be affected or may affect your project, both positively and negatively, right? But these are key stakeholders who their requirements, their constraints, their assumptions take a heavy weight, right? And you write them down. The best firms have the ability to dedicate resources through these portfolio and program efforts, right? And so implementation through projects, programs, and portfolios is critical in the strategic and competitive success. Remember, everything we write about should have this understanding that your project is tied and a function of corporate strategy, right? It is that high. Okay. So there are challenges in project management. I mentioned the triple constraint and making trade-offs between scope, schedule, and cost, right, to keep that triangle in balance. But there are other challenges, right? We want to make sure we're meeting strategic goals. So we've got to know what those goals are, right? And we want to link our tactical project to those strategic efforts, right? And I usually link to strategy from my project to strategy through a document called the Requirements Traceability Matrix. I'm going to trace my requirements back to some overarching document. Might be a government law, might be the corporate strategy, right? Because I'm always looking to streamline and increase efficiencies. We'll give that a term later called value mapping, value stream mapping, sometimes it's called. Value engineering is another term, right? To increase efficiencies. How can I accomplish the scope without any change to it for less cost, right? All right, so then we want to cope with ambiguity and complexity in the project, and that happens all the time. And we want to keep up with technology and coordinate. There it is again, interdependent systems. And integration is what we do best. It's who we are. So projects really go down like this, right? A lot of people reference the BOK, or body of knowledge, right? So for us, it would be the PMBOK guide, the project manager's body of knowledge. That's not the only place that you can get, but it's a good, solid reference. And so you take the BOK, if you have access to it, plus your own project skills. We're all project managers. Life is a project manager. It's one thing I love about this curriculum is that project management is at the same time an academic discipline and a life skill. Very few share that, which I think is very interesting. So you'll take your PM skills, mostly learned here and in similar courses, and add your own subject matter expertise. That's your SME knowledge. And the whole goal is to combine those in the V to satisfy the customers, right? So you're going to use the BOK. You're going to look at proving technologies and emerging capabilities. And you're going to build your project plan, which becomes your method, your methodology. And because this is very important, The PMBOK guide in the bottom left of this slide is descriptive. It's going to describe what you should do. It is not prescriptive. It is not telling you what to do. You have to determine that based on your company culture, based on your cost management, your finances, your risks, etc. You must integrate that. So the BOK is descriptive if you use it, but you, through this plan you build, becomes your method, your methodology. It becomes prescriptive at that point. So projects, again, linked to strategic objectives. I list on this slide any number of things that can trigger a project, right? Like market demand. Once iPhone had initial success, Samsung was like, hey, we need a project. I'm not saying it went down exactly in that order, but you can see how one spurs another. What about a new training program at work can spur a project, right? Based on a business need, for example. Okay. And because projects drive change, projects take us from the corporate current state to the future state. So the project is tied to strategy. And that can be both for business value, to achieve this business value in the future state. And that can be tangible or intangible, right? It can be goodwill, perhaps. That's intangible. Some other examples there. Now, project management is going to do that through the life cycle, right? And the life cycle can have multiple phases. I show 3 random phases here just to show you a phase, right? And before you get to your life cycle, you want to assess your product life cycle, which is and the project life cycle. Now, the project life cycle is from the day the project starts to the day it ends, and you turn the deliverable over. The product life cycle continues from there until that product is no longer carried at all. That's the product life cycle. Now, back to the project life cycle. So we talked about initiating, planning, executing, controlling, and closing. You'll actually do that in every single phase of the life cycle, right? So if you have a design phase, you'll do it. And at closing, you'll do a gate review. Should we continue to the next phase, right? And the answer could be yes or no. It might be no. We recommend closing the project, right? And then the next phase that I have listed there would be like the test phase. And you would again do initiating, planning, executing, controlling, and closing. And in closing, you do a gate check. And then the final phase I have shown on the slide, but doesn't have to be, is the transition to operations maybe, right? And in that transition, you'll do initiating, planning, executing, controlling, closing. That might include things like training or transition requirements, etc. And then at that point, you will get at the gate check, because you're done with your project, you will get customer sign off in the validate scope process. So the customer will attest in writing, whether they're internal customer or external, that they accept your deliverable. Okay? And of course, throughout the whole process, project managers are constantly tailoring to make sure that we're meeting the needs, that we're applying this framework of the PMBOK guide and creating this methodology which drives it. And in this approach, you can see the little tube on the right. Those are some of the early documents that we've had to use so far. Some of the benefits management or business documents, right? And then we're going to create a charter. So you can see how they start out high level and wide, and we're beginning to narrow them down. We're tailoring them to details, right? When I say business documents, there are really 2 that we are concerned with. One is the business case, which documents the feasibility of this project to accomplish strategic objectives like return on investment or advance research or something, right? It's why the C-suite wants to do this project. What need is the project fulfilling? And then, of course, with that would come the benefits management plan, right? Which is going to define the process for maximizing the benefits. And so we're taking these super high level documents in the business documents, creating a now just high-level charter, and eventually detailing that down, breaking that down into a detailed plan to produce project deliverables. Okay. To do this, oftentimes we use something called organizational project management, or OPM. It's actually its own book, separate from the PMBOK guide. OPM, Organizational Project Management. This is the framework used to align the projects and the programs and the portfolio management practices in any single organization, right? And you want to customize these and fit these practices within the organization's context and structure, right? And so the Project Management Institute produces a standard, which is the picture of the book on the right, the standard for organizational project management. And that provides guidance to organizational management, right, for PMO staffs, the project management office, for them to work with on certain topics, okay? And that would be a good tool you can use, because what you're trying to do is apply governance, right, to make sure that the strategic needs are tied to your actual project. So in this slide, we just discussed the business case, which is how is my project meeting the needs, the corporate needs, the strategic needs, right? And to do that, you are talking to stakeholders, mostly internal, some external, especially if they have a customer. And from there, you're going to do planning and executing, right? So part of the business case will end with building a charter, and then I'm off to planning and executing the project to accomplish some sort of benefits. Benefits realization is the term that we call it, right? So if I'm having, and then we're going to assess the baselines in that process. So benefits realization. If I'm having a Thanksgiving party, is the point to have 20 people there and just enough food so that there are only leftovers? Those are measures of a project called a Thanksgiving party. But what might be the other benefits? Do I want to measure, did everybody talk to each other? Were they able to exchange ideas? Was there goodwill built and a sense of warmth that would want them to come back? Right? That's benefits realization that you have to assess in your project. Now, the business case I already touched on, but really it's from the C-suite. It's part of the business documents, and it's going to include some of your financial costs and what are the benefits and even non-financial costs for why your project is needed and how it might go about it. It's a very, very high level, but it's an important tool, as then you use these documents to build your charter, and you'll use these documents in your charter to build a more detailed project plan that is aligned. Alignment is essential. So I will also then later in the course discuss project selection methods, right? How we evaluate them, how we choose them. The business documents are doing much of that for you. They are saying, actually, here in these business documents, we choose this project over another one. Later we're going to, there's a term called, well, I'll get into that in a minute. So we're selecting this C-suite. The C-suite is selecting. If you're the project manager and you get a chance to sit in on the C-suite doing this work, building the business case, you really, as a project manager, will have not much to add. But what you're doing, it's gold, is sitting in the back against the wall, making notes, assessing stakeholders, listening to their objections, writing them down. You will want to understand your stakeholders. There's a lot of good information there. And so the C-suite will pick a project based sometimes on non-numeric models and then also on numeric models, and it can be both. A non-numeric model is one that does not return a number or a value. Really, it's just a model that helps us justify our projects, right? It doesn't make them bad, it's just not a number, right? They could be sacred cows in the company, or operating necessity, or even competitive necessary, as described here, and some more here. Next, we're going to get into numeric models right after this.